She didn't look like someone who would steal a rooftop. She looked like someone who whispered poems to trees and forgot birthdays. But that day, when I climbed to the top of the building just to breathe, she was already there, chalk in one hand, a thermos in the other, and my name written in giant letters across the wall like she had known me long before we ever met. She didn't flinch when I saw it. She just looked over her shoulder and said, "You're late." I stared at her for too long, at the chalk dust on her fingertips, at the steam curling from the thermos cap like it had been waiting for me. I thought maybe she was crazy, or lonely, or both, but when I finally spoke, my voice came out small. "Do I know you?" She didn't answer right away. She crouched down, drew a half moon next to my name, then stood up and wiped her hands on the back of her jeans. "I figured you'd find this place eventually," she said. "This place?" She looked around like the rooftop was more hers than the building it belonged to. Then she said, "The place where your name finally feels safe." I should have left. That's what normal people do when strangers act like they've read your diary. But something about her tone was calm, confident, like she wasn't offering anything dangerous, just a secret. I didn't know I needed yet, so I stayed. She poured tea from the thermos into a small ceramic cup. Not plastic, not paper. Ceramic, like she carried her own stillness with her. Wherever she went, she handed it to me without asking if I wanted it. I took it anyway. It was warm, sweet, spiced with something I couldn't name. "You live here?" I asked. She smiled. "Do rooftops count as homes?" I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. We sat not close, not far. She took out a piece of chalk and started writing again. Not words, symbols, arrows, spirals, .a. Single question mark inside a square. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Mapping." Silence. I blinked. "Is that a real thing?" She nodded once, then said, "Everything leaves a sound behind, even quiet." I learned her name hours later, only because Sabirah. She said it like a song, only she remembered the tune too. I told her mine. She didn't write it down, didn't repeat it, just nodded like it made sense. That became the first of many evenings. We shared the rooftop. No plans, no texts, just instinct. Somehow, we both knew when to climb the stairs, when to bring Thermoses, when not to talk. Sometimes she drew things, sometimes I did. I wasn't an artist, not really, but she handed me chalk one night and said, "Your silence deserves color." So I drew poorly, but it didn't matter. We never judged the shape, only the feeling. She never talked about school or family or weekends. She never asked about mine either. It was like our world only existed when our feet touched that rooftop below. Everything else was static up here. Everything breathed. One night, I asked her why she started coming here. She said to listen to the part of me no one else hears. Then she handed me a folded note. I opened it. Inside was a single sentence. Not every wound bleeds loud. I started to bring things to old photos, notebooks, snacks she never ate, drawings I never showed anyone else. We didn't talk about meaning. We let objects speak for us. A casset with no label. A feather with red ink on it. A rock shaped like a question mark. She once brought a glass marble that glowed in the dark. Said it used to belong to someone she loved, didn't say who, didn't say when. She rolled it across the rooftop and watched it spin like a tiny world that refused to stop turning. One night, the city was louder than usual. Police sirens, arguments from a nearby apartment window, a distant car alarm that wouldn't die. I looked at her and said, "Doesn't the noise ruin the silence?" She shook her head. "This isn't noise," she said. "This is proof we're not alone." I started writing things on the rooftop when she wasn't there. Messages in chalk. Short sentences. I never said out loud, "Did you ever wonder if we were supposed to meet?" Or "I don't even know your last name." Or some silences are starting to feel like answers. She never mentioned them, but she always replied, next to my words. She'd draw a ladder, a closed envelope, a tree with its roots exposed. It became our language, word and picture, question and echo. One evening she arrived before me when I climbed the stairs. She was already curled up in her usual corner, thermos on one side, scarf wrapped tight. Her face was turned toward the horizon like she was listening to the sunset. I sat down slowly, waited for her to speak. She didn't, not for a long time. Then finally, she whispered, "I think I have to leave soon." I felt it in my stomach before I felt it in my chest. "Why?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just passed me the thermos. It was cold the first time it had ever been cold. That's when I knew this wasn't just a routine. It was a lifeline, and something. Whatever she was running from was cutting it. I held the cold thermos in my hands like it was a question with no answer. She didn't look at me, just kept staring at the sky like it was counting down. "You're not the first person I've shared this rooftop with," she said softly. It felt like a confession, but also like a warning. I didn't speak, didn't want to break the shape of whatever memory she was holding. "His name was Ferris," she said. She ran her finger along the rim of the thermos. "We used to come here when we had nowhere else to go." I felt something twist in my chest. "Where is he now?" I asked. She turned toward me. Her face didn't change, but her eyes carried something sharp and far away. "Gone." She didn't say it like he moved. She said it like he vanished. I nodded slowly. Didn't ask more. She uncapped the thermos again and poured the cold tea into the cup between us. Steam didn't rise this time, only silence. "I thought if I kept coming back," she whispered, "I'd find some version of him here. Something left over, a chalk line, a footprint, a breath." Her voice cracked, and then you showed up instead. I wanted to say I was sorry, but sorry felt like a Band-Aid on a broken window, so I just said, "I don't think you found the wrong person." She looked at me like she didn't know how to believe that, but also like she wanted to. After that night, something shifted. She didn't draw as much, didn't bring chalk every time. Sometimes, she just sat with her hands in her pockets, as if holding something invisible. I started bringing the thermos. Instead, filled it with cinnamon tea, sometimes peppermint, once vanilla and lemon, which she hated but drank anyway. Then one day I arrived, and she wasn't there, not 10 minutes. Late, not an hour, not at all. I waited 3 hours, left a drawing on the rooftop. 2 figures sitting under a single tree. The next night, she wasn't there either. Or the night after that. 4 days passed before she came back. Her eyes were red, her scarf was missing. I asked if she was okay. She nodded, then shook her head, then didn't say anything. We sat in silence so thick it almost drowned us. She took the chalk from her pocket, wrote one word, "Tomorrow." I didn't know what it meant, not fully, but my chest tightened when I saw it, because tomorrow felt like a door. And Sabirah always drew doors before she disappeared. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the rooftop empty, the thermos cold, my name washed away by rain. I realized I had never asked for her number or her last name, or even what school she went to. I knew her favorite kind of tea. I knew she hated the sound of zippers. I knew she believed silence was a map. But I didn't know how to find her if she stopped letting me. The next day, I climbed the rooftop earlier than usual. The air was cloudy, like something was about to fall. Sabirah was already there. She didn't look up when I arrived, didn't smile, just held out a folded piece of paper. I took it without a word, unfolded. It slowly inside was a drawing, a train, a bridge, a tiny figure holding a thermos at the edge of the platform. She didn't explain it. She didn't have to. "I'm not running away," she said quietly. "I'm just following something." What? Myself. I wanted to ask her to stay, wanted to scream it, but something about her. Stillness stopped me. She wasn't leaving because of fear. She was leaving because she had to. Like breath after too much holding, like water after the dam breaks. We spent that last rooftop evening quietly. She drank tea. I drew a tiny moon in the corner of the wall before she left. She placed something beside me, a marble, the same one that glowed in the dark. She pressed it into my palm, closed my fingers around it, then whispered, "You don't have to draw silence anymore. You've learned how to live inside it." Then she left, no goodbye, just footsteps down the stairs, and the sound of the thermos lid clicking shut. After she left, the rooftop changed. It didn't look different. The chalk stains were still there. So was the wall she wrote my name on. But it felt emptier, like something had stepped out of the air and taken the weight with it. I still came back every evening, not to wait, but to remember. I brought the thermos, now chipped slightly at the rim. I poured tea into both cups, even when there was no one to hand the second one to. It felt wrong to stop, like ending the ritual would erase her entirely. On the fifth night, I brought chalk, wrote her name in the far corner, smaller than mine, less bold, a little uncertain. Then I drew a bridge between them, just a simple arch, unsteady but standing. That's how I felt too. I started writing in a notebook after that. Not a journal, not exactly, just thoughts, questions. I never asked her, answers I didn't expect. Pages filled with phrases like, "What if you were the story and I was just the listener?" Why did the silence feel like a third person sitting between us? Was I too quiet or just finally in the right volume? I found myself retracing the places we'd never gone. Corners of the rooftop we never sat on, the side she never drew on. There were parts of her, even the chalk never touched, that made me ache in a way I didn't know how to name. Then one day, a week after she'd gone, something changed. I climbed the rooftop like I always did, expecting nothing, preparing myself to feel everything. And there it was, a new drawing on the wall. Fresh chalk, still bright. It was a ladder tilted sideways. A compass at the top, and next to it, a single line written in her handwriting. "You're not lost. You're just somewhere. I haven't arrived yet." I stared at it for minutes, maybe longer. I wasn't sure what it meant. Was she back? Had she returned without telling me? Was she watching, leaving pieces of herself like breadcrumbs? I left a reply the next night, drew a window. Inside it, 2 cups of tea, dots, steam rising, and underneath, some silences wait longer than others. The drawings continued, not every night, but just enough to know she was still out there, still listening, still tracing the echo of what we had created. Then, on a particularly cold evening, I found a package wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine. No note, no name, just left in the center of the rooftop like a quiet offering. I opened it slowly. Inside was a scarf, the one she always wore, faded now, but still carrying the smell of peppermint and smoke. And inside the folds another drawing too. Rooftops, connected by a single wire, and hanging from the wire, a paper airplane caught mid-flight. That night, I didn't draw. I just sat there, wrapped the scarf around. My shoulders held the marble in one hand, the thermos in the other. And for the first time, I whispered aloud to the sky, "You were the quietest person I ever met, and the loudest thing I'll never forget." The letter with no address, the envelope, had no stamp, no name, Just a sketch of a rooftop drawn on the front and a smudge of red. Ink where a fingerprint had tried to disappear. I found it inside my locker, tucked between a notebook I didn't remember. Writing in and a pencil I'd already broken. Someone had placed it there while I wasn't looking. But somehow, I knew exactly who it was from, and I knew even before I opened it. This wasn't a message meant to be read. It was a map meant to be followed. I skipped last period. My chest was too full, my hands too unsure. The rooftop wasn't waiting for me. It never had to dot it, just existed like gravity. Or breath. The sky was already folding into evening when I reached the top. The wind didn't speak. The chalk was undisturbed, but in the far corner, taped to the underside of the railing, was another envelope, this one thinner. Smaller, it said nothing, but inside was a drawing. Of train platform, a girl with her back turned, a scarf tied to her wrist, and on the bottom corner, the faintest scribble of words I could barely read. Find what I left behind before it forgets me too. I stared at the drawing for a long time. Something about the lines felt more rushed than usual, more afraid, like her hand had trembled while finishing it, or like she didn't want to finish it at all. I started noticing signs of her again. Small ones, barely their traces, like the dust of a memory, trying not to fade. Chalk symbol drawn under a bench outside the library. The smell of cinnamon near the stairwell. A folded origami star left on my front porch with no explanation. None of these things made sense on their own, but they stitched together a pattern I couldn't ignore. She was either near, or she was making it feel like she still was, and both possibilities haunted me. I began searching for places. She might have gone. Old maps, train stations, empty art rooms at school. Everywhere I looked. I left something behind too. A chalk line, a message, a piece of a story. I wasn't trying to chase her anymore. I was trying to prove I'd remembered. Then one afternoon, I heard someone say her name. Not a whisper, not a question. A statement, as if she still belonged in conversations. I froze. It was two girls walking behind me in the hall. She used to come to the train station on Fridays. One of them said, always with that same thermos and weird notebook. She'd just sit there, sketching people, never got on any train. That night, I went to the train station, not because I expected to find her, but because I didn't want to live with the ache of wondering anymore. The platform was mostly empty. Rain hung in the air without falling, and there, taped to the back of the schedule board, was another drawing. This one different. Rushed, cracked at the edge. It showed a single rooftop, empty. No thermos, no scarf. Just a word scratched into the floor. Wait. I sat down on the bench, opened the thermos. I still brought with me the tea. Inside was cold, but I drank it anyway. A small act of remembering. A small act of stubborn hope. Someone sat beside me. Not her, but someone else. A boy with headphones and a paint-stained jacket. He didn't look at me, didn't speak. But after a while, he said, "You're looking for her, too." My heart stalled, then raced. Who? The girl who leaves drawings behind? He pulled something from his bag. A sketchbook. Worn. Familiar. He handed it to me. Inside were replicas of drawings I'd seen. The train, the ladder, the paper. Airplane. She used to leave these for me, he said quietly. I thought I was the only one. And just like that, the story wasn't mine alone anymore. There were others who had shared her silence, drunk her tea, read her chalk without fully understanding it. We exchanged names, not for friendship, but for truth. He was Elias. He said he met her at an art therapy class 3 towns over. She didn't say much, he said, but she listened better than anyone. Together, we made a plan. Not a mission, not a search party. Just a quiet agreement To keep looking where she might have left her fingerprints, too. Keep answering the questions she never asked out loud. Over? The next few days, we returned to places she had touched. The art store with the squeaky floor. The old library where the power flickered. The alley with the bird mural no one ever finished. And at each place, we left something behind. A chalk message, a cup of tea. A small stone with the words still carved into it. Elias once asked me what I thought she was trying to say through all this. I told him I didn't think she wanted to be found. I think she wanted to be remembered without being held, like fog, like music fading down a hallway. One morning, I returned to the rooftop. Just me. This time, the scarf was gone. The chalk was washed away. But in the corner of the wall, in tiny, almost invisible letters, someone had written, "A story doesn't end just because the voice gets quieter." I started bringing a second thermos. Again, not for her return, but for the possibility of it. It felt like leaving the door unlocked, even if no one ever came in. Elias and I began meeting on rooftops, not just ours. Others, we made a map of the city. Circled places she might have gone. Places that felt like her, quiet, forgotten, beautiful in the way old books are worn. But sacred. There was one rooftop we kept avoiding. The tallest one downtown. The one with no ladder access. Too many cameras. Too clean, too perfect to be hers. But one afternoon, Elise showed up with a folded piece of paper. It was an old flyer, crinkled at the corners, for a poetry event that happened 3 months ago. The featured name was handwritten at the bottom. Not hers exactly, but close. Sabirah L. The L had been smudged into the shape of a wave, or maybe a feather. We went that evening, climbed 10 floors, dodged 2 motion sensors, and found ourselves on the highest rooftop. In the city, it was nearly empty. Only a single line of chalk curled along the far wall. It read, "Don't search for me like I'm missing. Search for me like I left pieces behind." Below it, a jar. Inside the jar, -notes. Dozens, folded, tiny, paper -thin. Each one had a message, or a fragment of one. Some barely legible, some full of clarity. None of them signed, but they were hers. We knew it. They were written in the language only people like us could read, the language of thermoses and chalk, of broken cups and borrowed silences. One note said, "He cried when I gave him the marble. I think that means I did it right." Another, "I don't belong to anyone, but I used to belong to rooftops." And another, "If you find this, write back. Tell me what the silence told you." Elias and I didn't speak much after reading them. We just sat, poured tea, watched the skyline breathe, and then I said, almost without meaning to, "She left us something." Elias nodded. "But what?" We spent the next 3 days decoding the notes. They didn't follow order. They weren't dated. But they felt like entries in a diary kept sideways. Moments she left behind not to explain herself, but to prove she'd been here, to keep the silence from winning. Some of the messages weren't written in words, just sketches. A hand reaching out. A tree with roots wrapped around a clock. A compass with no directions. Just the word "stay" written where north should be. And a window with rain falling on both sides of the glass. Elias and I started leaving messages of our own. Chalked on benches, scrawled on alley walls, folded into paper cranes, left on windowsills, not for her, but for others like her. People who had met her once and never forgot. People who had only heard her name in a whisper, but felt it like a song they couldn't unhear. And they began to write back. Not many, but enough. A girl who found a note inside her locker that said, "It's okay not to speak today." A boy who sat at the same cafe every Tuesday, because once Sabirah had handed him a napkin that said, "You don't have to earn rest." A teacher who kept a chalk drawing she once made on his blackboard. Too beautiful to erase. We didn't know what it meant. All of this, all of them. But we knew something was forming. A community of people connected not by photos, or numbers, or tags, but by the simple, quiet act of being seen. Once gently, then never forgotten, one evening, back on the original rooftop, I found something new. Not a note, not a message, just a drawing, a thermos, one cup, but this time, the steam rising out of it formed a shape a heart cracked down the center, but stitched at the edges with thread. Next to it, a single line, not broken, just held differently now. That night, I cried. Not the loud kind, the kind that builds behind the eyes for days, then spills when no one's looking. Elias didn't say anything. He just poured me tea and drew a tiny cup next to the one already on the wall. A second presence, a second witness. That night after the rooftop, I walked home slower than usual. The city felt different, or maybe I did. Every streetlight flickered a little, like memory. Every shadow looked like someone who had just turned the corner. When I got home, I opened my notebook, not the one with chalk messages. The other one. The one I never let Sabirah see. The one with everything. I never said. I flipped to a blank page, wrote one sentence. You were the pause I never knew I needed. I didn't know who I was writing it for. Maybe her, maybe myself. Maybe for the version of me that existed only when she was around. The next morning, something strange happened. I opened my locker and found a folded paper crane, yellow, taped to the inside of the door. No note, no message, just the word soon written in tiny print on one of the wings. The handwriting was definitely hers, but softer, almost uncertain, like it had been written in a rush, or like she wasn't sure if she wanted to be. Found again. I didn't tell Elias at first. I wasn't ready, because soon wasn't a promise. It was a maybe dressed in hope, and I didn't want to offer him hope unless I was sure. But I couldn't help myself. That evening, I returned to the rooftop alone, sat in my usual place, unfolded the paper. Crane laid it flat and drew something next to it. A pair of hands holding string, unraveled, but not torn. I wrote beneath it, I'm still here, even if you only come back as a breeze. That's when I saw the shadow, just a flicker of movement from the stairwell. I turned, no one, only the sound of footsteps retreating, fast, but not panicked, almost shy, like whoever it was had come to check if I still waited, then left before I could ruin it by speaking. I chased only for a second, but there was no one in the stairwell, just the echo of a soft laugh that could have been the wind or memory or her. The next day, Elias asked if I was okay. I nodded, but then I paused, reached into my pocket, pulled out the unfolded crane, showed him the word. He held it gently, didn't smile, didn't ask questions, just said, "Then she's not finished with the story either." We spent the rest of the week building something new, not a shrine, not a memorial, something smaller, more alive. We took a wooden box and filled it with our own messages, drawings, notes, tea bags we never used. Small objects that meant something only. To us, a cracked spoon, a bottle cap with a tiny star on it, a list of names we'd found other people. Touched by her, we buried it on the rooftop, under a tile that only we knew could be lifted on top. We chalked a small phrase. If you've been found, this is for you. We didn't need to find her. Not completely, because in some ways, she had already found us. In the silences, in the chalk dust, in the way the tea always tasted a little like goodbye and a little like home. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. She wasn't asking to be chased. She was asking to be continued, and maybe we were the ones she trusted to carry the rest. That night, before we left, I wrote something across the old wall, the wall where she first wrote my name, the one that started it all, in soft, careful lines. I chalked the words. The rooftop was never ours. It just let us belong to it for a little while. The boy who asked the wrong question, the first thing he said was, "So which one of you invented her?" Not where did she go? Not what did she leave behind? Not even did she ever really exist? He leaned against the railing, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes scanning the wall like it was a crime scene instead of a memory. I didn't know who he was, but he knew the chalk. He knew the thermoses. He knew her name, and that meant something was about to change. His name was Ilias, spelled different from Elias, sounded almost the same, but carried a colder tone, less music, more knife. He didn't sit down, didn't ask to join. He just hovered like someone waiting for a train he didn't want to board. Elias and I exchanged a glance, then stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is defense, but Elias wasn't afraid of silence. He cracked it open with a smirk and a single question. "So, did you two just fall in love with her silence or something?" Elias stood up first, slowly, measured, nigh. Stayed seated, staring at the chalkboard wall like it might rewrite itself if I blinked hard enough. Elias pointed at the paper. Airplane drawing. The one Sabirah had left months ago. "You know she used to draw these when she was anxious?" he said. "I once watched her fold one with bloody knuckles." He said it so casually I almost missed the weight of it. But the moment he said bloody, something in my chest snapped. "Who are you?" I asked. He finally looked at me, up close. His face was tired, not messy, not broken, just tired in the way people get when they stop expecting anything to come back. "I'm the one she left behind before you." He dropped a notebook at my feet. Worn leather tied with thread, same kind Sabirah once used to tie her scarf. "I thought you should read it," he said, "before you keep building a church around a girl who is trying to leave the altar." He turned to go, but stopped halfway down the stairs. Without looking back, he said, "She never said goodbye to me either." Then he vanished. Elias knelt beside the notebook, didn't touch it, like it might burn, like it might bleed. I picked it up, held it to my chest before. I opened it, felt the weight of it, how it was heavier than it looked, like it held stories no one had finished yet. Inside were sketches, letters, UNSENT ones, poems that didn't rhyme, phrases like, "You can't plant yourself in someone else's silence and call it safety." "I'm tired of being a metaphor. If I disappear, promise you'll only draw ladders, not cages." We read in silence, took turns, paused often, breathed in the pages. Like they still carried her perfume. It didn't change who she was, but it changed who we were to her. We weren't the only ones. We weren't the first ones, and maybe we weren't even meant to last. Later, I asked Elias if he regretted any of it. He shook his head, then said, "Just because a song ends doesn't mean it wasn't worth listening to." The next evening, I came to the rooftop alone, left the notebook on the bench, left a message beside it in chalk. "If you're looking for her, read gently. She was never made for sharp edges." That night it rained hard, but the chalk didn't wash away, it stayed faint. But there and that felt like its own kind of miracle. I didn't open the notebook again for 3 days. It sat on my desk like a heartbeat I didn't want to listen to. I kept thinking of that last thing Elias said. She never said goodbye to me either, like it was a shared scar or a warning. Elias stayed distant during those days, not because we were angry, but because the silence between us had changed shape. It used to be soft. Now it had weight, like we were both holding the same glass but too afraid to drop it. On the 4th night, I returned to the rooftop alone. The notebook came with me. The air was heavy. Even the stars seemed to wait. I untied the thread, opened to a random page, found a sketch of her hand holding something small. A key, a thorn, maybe both. Underneath, she'd written, "The things I carry aren't always mine." That line held me still, because I remembered the marble, the thermos, the scarf, all left behind like they meant nothing and everything. And I realized maybe that's what she did. She carried pieces of others until they were too heavy. Then she passed them along like quiet gifts, like saying, "Here, you hold this now." Later in the notebook came a folded paper, old, wrinkled, .a. School form. Her name, printed in the top corner, Sabirah Leone. There it was, whole, UNHIDDEN.I. Trace the letters with my thumb. Below its guardian's signature, N.A., emergency contact, N.A. And scrawled in pencil beside that, "It's okay. I'm the emergency." The page after that held a different kind of writing. Not a letter, not a poem, just a single paragraph. Ilias once told me I make people feel seen. But no one ever asks what it feels like to carry everyone else's reflection. Sometimes I just want to be invisible without being forgotten. I want someone to know me even when I'm not being useful. I closed the notebook. Felt like I'd read something sacred or stolen. I wanted to protect her story, but I also knew now this was never just mine to protect. I texted Elias, told him we needed to talk. We met on the rooftop. As always, he brought the tea this time, didn't say anything when he handed me the cup. I placed the notebook between us, open to the paragraph. He read it, blinked slowly, then whispered, "I think we were part of her map, not her destination." It made sense, too. Much sense. She never stayed, but she always gave enough to be remembered, like a trail of stars across someone else's sky. We made a decision that night not to stop looking, but to stop needing answers. Sabirah had left a blueprint behind, not for where she was going, but for how to live when someone like her passes through. You, quietly, deeply, briefly. We returned to the places she once marked. We added new drawings, not to mimic her voice, but to continue the language. She taught us a spiral drawn on a mirror, a chalk feather in an alley corner, a teacup drawn on the side of a vending machine. We met more people, each with a piece of her. A memorya kindness. A moment she gave them and never took credit for. One girl, said Sabirah, once sat beside her on a bench and didn't speak for 20 minutes, just held space. And when she left, she slipped her a note that said, "You don't need to shrink to fit in someone's silence." Another boy showed us a scar on his wrist. Thin.old, he said. Sabirah drew a ladder on his cast once. Didn't ask about the scar. Didn't look at it like it defined him. Just drew the ladder and whispered, "You don't have to climb alone." Every story added color to the one I thought I already knew, and I realized Sabirah wasn't a puzzle, she was a prism. You didn't solve her, you looked through her and saw yourself differently. The next time I saw Ilias, he wasn't alone. He stood at the foot of the rooftop stairs, talking to a girl I didn't recognize. Short hair, ink-stained fingers, eyes like she knew more than she was saying. When they looked up and saw me, she waved, not shy, not loud, just sure. I found her too, Shay said. Her name was Ruha. She held out a sketchbook wrapped in brown string. Sabirah gave me this, she said before she left town. I remember the word left punching a space into my chest. Ruha. Saw it on my face. She didn't say where she was going, she added quickly. But she told me to give this to someone. She didn't say who, just said I'd know when the time came. The sketchbook was different from the one Ilias gave us. Lighter, smaller, but every page was bursting. ink bleeding into the corners, drawings layered with words, memories stacked like fingerprints. One page showed a door, wide open. Inside was a rooftop. Ours. Even the broken tile near the bench was drawn exactly as it was, underneath the door. 3 words, I made this. The next page was a city skyline, except the stars were labeled. Each one had a name, small ones. First names, nicknames, sometimes initials. E for Elias, I for Elias, R for Ruha, and mine drawn twice. Once as just my first initial, and once fully. Written my name in her handwriting, underlined next to a tiny drawing of a thermos and 2 cups. I closed the book, not out of fear, but because the ache was warm. Now, like it belonged with me, like it was supposed to be carried. Ruha said Sabirah gave her the sketchbook at a train station 3 weeks ago. She was wearing yellow, she said. She hugged me like I was the last chapter of something. I didn't ask what Sabirah said when she left. I didn't need to, because every person she touched told the same story. She didn't disappear. She dissolved gently, like sugar and tea, like chalk and rain, like silence. That knew exactly when to speak. That night, Elias and I returned to the rooftop with Elias and Ruza for Ther Moses. 4 cups. For silences. Braided into one, we passed around the books, poured tea, traded memories, and we began to realize. We weren't just remembering her, we were becoming her, not in copies, not in imitation, but in softness, in attention, in the way we had learned to see people without asking them to explain themselves. We left a message that night, the 4 of us in the center of the rooftop. We drew a compass, but instead of directions, we wrote home, hope, grief, begin. And in the middle, we drew a heart. Not perfect, a little lopsided. Cracked down the side, but stitched, always stitched. I stayed after the others left. Alone again, the rooftop quiet. A soft breeze touched the back of my neck. I turned, no one, only the sound of chalk clinking gently against stone, and a new drawing on the wall that hadn't been there before. Still wet, still fresh. A single feather floating, and next to it, when the wind gets quiet, I'll come back. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I ever stared at anything, and when I finally blinked, I whispered back, I'll leave the thermos warm. The rooftop with no door. The map wasn't drawn on paper. It was hidden in the folds of her scarf. Ruha found it 3 days after the chalk feather appeared. She hadn't touched the scarf in weeks, said it still smelled like burnt cinnamon and dusk. But that morning, as she unfolded it to wear again, a strip of thin tracing paper slid out. On it, a single sketch. A rooftop, no stairwell. No door, no railing. No ladder, just 4 walls. And a single chalk word in the center, buried. It didn't make sense. At first, how do you find a rooftop with no way in? And why would Sabirah send us somewhere we couldn't reach? But Elias had a theory. He flipped through her old notebook, found a phrase we hadn't noticed before, buried in the margin of a poem we once thought was unfinished. Sometimes the highest place you reach is inside yourself. The search took a week. We followed the skyline, compared building shapes, measured shadow angles from her sketches. It felt like trying to remember a dream by building it in reverse. Then Ruha found it, an abandoned school, fenced off, half demolished. Graffiti everywhere. Its rooftop was flat, small, and silent. No stairs, no visible door, just a rusted DRANPIPE. Elias looked at me. I think this is it. We climbed, slow tans scraped, breath tight. When we reached the top, no one said anything for a long time, because it looked exactly like the drawing. 4 walls, no exit, and in the middle, written in a circle of faded chalk, Here lies the version of me I tried to erase. Ruha stepped inside first, then Elias, then Elias. I stayed outside the circle for a long time, not because I was scared, but because I knew once I stepped in, I couldn't unknow what I'd find. Inside the chalk ring was a small metal box, locked, no. Ruha sat cross-legged and stared at it. Elias took off his jacket and folded it. Over his knees, Elias pulled a coin from his pocket and spun it across the rooftop. Like he was trying to decide if any of this was real. No. One touched the box for hours. We just sat, letting the rooftop breathe around us, letting the silence do what Sabirah always trusted it to do, speak louder than questions. When I finally opened the box, it didn't click. It sighed, inside, 5 things. A dried daisy, a tiny mirror cracked in the center, a rolled-up film strip, a matchbook with 1 match left, and a note that said, "If you're here, then you've already forgiven the version of me that couldn't stay." The silence after, that was too thick to climb out of, so we didn't try. We just stayed. Let the wind pass through us. Let the sunlight stretch its fingers across the mirror's broken face. Elias finally said, "Maybe she wasn't trying to be found. Maybe she just wanted to be seen this deeply." That night, I developed the film. Each frame held pieces of her we'd never seen. Sabirah dancing in an empty field. Sabirah lying on her back with her hands over her eyes. Sabirah sitting on a train platform alone, surrounded by shadows. And one frame completely white. Just light. Like she'd disappeared mid-photo. Like the camera caught her just as she was turning into memory. I held the white frame against the light. For a long time, felt something I couldn't name in my chest. It wasn't grief, not exactly. It was something quieter, heavier, like love that didn't get to finish its sentence. That night, I didn't go to the rooftop. I stayed in my room, sat in the dark, lit the match, watched it burn. Didn't light anything with it. Didn't make a wish. Just watched it. One small act of letting go. One quiet promise not to hold on too tight. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You don't belong to the silence anymore. You belong to everyone who heard you inside it." The next morning, we returned to the buried rooftop. We didn't speak on the way there. It was the kind of silence that meant respect, grief's gentler sibling. The daisy was still in the box. The cracked mirror, too. But something was different. In the center of the chalk circle, a new message had been added. None of us wrote it. We would have said if we had. The words were too neat, too Sabirah. They read, "You don't have to become me to understand me." That was the moment. I felt the rooftop breathe. Not metaphorically, literally, the wind shifted. The walls creaked. A sudden warmth passed through the space like a sigh exhaled into the sky. And the matchbook. Gone, vanished. Only a smudge of ash, where it had once been. Elias said it first. She came back. I didn't ask how he knew. I didn't need to. Because I felt it too. Not as footsteps, not as a shadow, but as stillness that arrived like a person. Deliberate, present, known. I lay down inside. The chalk circle felt the sun press against my cheeks. Closed my eyes, listened, birds, leaves, then the softest sound, like someone drawing on stone, like chalk, but lighter. I opened my eyes. Nothing there but Ruha was staring at the wall to our left. She walked to it slowly, pointed. The dust hadn't settled. Yet, a feather, drawn in reverse, like someone had been inside the wall, pressing outward. Ruha looked over her shoulder at me, whispered she never wanted to be outside. She just didn't want to be caged. I touched the cracked mirror, held it in my palm, watched how the light refracted across my face. It split me in two, but not violently, softly, as if saying, "You are allowed to be more than one version." We decided to leave something behind. All of us, a small thing. Nothing loud, just traces of ourselves folded into the silence. Elias left a pencil stub. Ruha, a photo of her first drawing. Ilias, a cassette tape labeled lullabies I never played. And me. I left the scarf, the one she wore when I first met her, folded neatly. No perfume left, just memory. Before we climbed back down, I turned one last time to the wall, wrote in soft white chalk, "If you return again, we won't ask where you've been. We'll just pour tea." Back on the ground, I didn't cry. I just stood still long enough to feel what staying felt like. And for the first time since Sabirah left, it didn't feel like waiting. It felt like arrival. That evening, the four of us returned to our original rooftop. The first one. The one with the broken tile. And the cup we never moved. The sun set slower that day, like it didn't want to leave either. We poured tea, passed around the books, and I realized something as we laughed, quietly, and shared the silence. She hadn't disappeared. She had multiplied. Through chalk dot through THER Moses, dot through scarred boys and tired girls and journals. With unfinished thoughts, through strangers who sat quietly beside each other and didn't need names to feel seen. Sabirah had never been a single person. She had been a moment, passed from hand to hand, like warmth in winter. And somehow we had become keepers of that warmth. That night, as I packed up to leave, I noticed something new. Under the bench, tucked into the crack where the stone met the wood. A final note, written in handwriting we all knew. Just 6 words. "Thank you for staying this long." The ritual of not forgetting Elias showed up with a bucket of paint. Not chalk, not a thermos, just paint. 2 colors, sky blue and matchbook orange. No one asked why. We didn't need to, because grief doesn't always ask for permission. Sometimes it just becomes art. He didn't say a word, just started brushing the far wall of the rooftop. Slow strokes. Soft corners. We watched, then joined. By sunset, the old wall was covered, sky above. Fire below, and in the center, untouched, a rectangle of bare stone. Blank space, waiting for something or someone. Ruha called it the silence frame. Ilias called it her door. I didn't call it anything, not yet, because naming it meant admitting it was real, permanent, final later that night. We brought candles not to mourn her, to remind ourselves she'd been here. Not just Sabirah, but every version of her. The girl who whispered kindness. The one who never stayed. The one who left stories in thermoses and goodbyes in chalk. We each placed one object at the base of the wall. Mine was a cup. Rua's was a folded paper star. Elias placed the pencil stub from the buried rooftop and Elias. He left nothing, just sat there, knees up, head down, like he was trying to remember the version of himself that still believed in goodbye. We didn't make speeches, just sat, let the night breathe through us, let the candles flicker, let the quiet turn soft again. When it was time to leave, Elias turned back to the wall, chalked 4 words across the silence frame. Not gone, just shifted shape. The next morning, someone added to it, not us. Same chalk, different hand. Beneath Elias's message, she's writing us back. Just slowly. We kept the ritual going. Every week, someone came to the rooftop. Not always the same people. Some we didn't. No. Some just sat and cried. Some left letters. Some never returned. And some left drawings of feathers, or stairs, or steaming cups that looked almost like ours. The silence frame became a living thing. Not a memorial. Not a goodbye. More like a pulse, changing every week. Sometimes sad, sometimes defiant. Always quiet. One day, a small envelope appeared, taped gently to the frame. No name on it. Inside, a torn page from a novel. Underlined sentence, "There are people who leave, not to disappear, but to make space for what you'll become without them." Elias stared at it for a long time, then said, almost to himself, "She left so we'd stop looking for her and start finding each other." That same week, Ruha brought paints again, this time dusk purple and coal gray. We didn't paint the wall, we painted the rooftop. Floor taut circles concentric, one inside the other, like ripples. We sat in the middle, poured a tea, and decided we wouldn't wait anymore, not for Sabirah, not for answers. We would live like her, gently, deeply, briefly, if we had to, but fully, and if she ever came back, we'd still be here. Thermos warm, silence soft, chalk ready. 2 weeks later, someone found her room, not her home, not her family, just the room she stayed in for 3 months before the rooftop. A neighbor remembered her. "Quiet girl," he said. "Always left notes under people's doors. Never signed." Sometimes she played music. Very soft, like rain inside a jar. He gave us the key, said it felt like we were the right ones. Didn't ask how we knew her. Didn't need to. Sometimes, connection doesn't require explanation, just evidence of care. The room was barely larger than a closet. A single mattress on the floor, curtains made from old bedsheets, a stack of notebooks tied with thread. No lights, just candles, melted to the base, and on the far wall a mural, drawn entirely in charcoal. A city skyline, with one rooftop glowing, and above it, stars shaped like hands, reaching toward the center, where a heart hovered, cracked but shining. Beneath it, 3 words, the same ones from the rooftop compass: hope, grief, begin. None of us spoke. We just stepped inside, removed our shoes, and sat, each of us in a different corner, as if taking the positions of her memories in the stack of notebooks. We found no names, no dates, just thoughts, moments, fragments, as if her mind had spilled in soft spirals. One page read, "Don't build statues of me. Build bridges between each other." Another, "I used to think disappearing meant fading. Now, I know it means blending into everything." There were poems she'd never shared, songs without notes, drawings of feathers unraveling into birds, and a list titled, "Things I Hope They Never Forget That Tea Tastes Different on Cold Days." That silence is a gift if you're not afraid of it. That I saw them, really saw them. That they made me softer. That I was never trying to be loved. That I loved anyway. I cried, not loudly, just enough. Ruha held my hand. Elias lit one of the leftover candles. Elias pressed his forehead to the wall and whispered something in a language I didn't know, but I didn't need a translation. The grief spoke clearly. We didn't take the notebooks. We left them, placed them gently back where they belonged. We took only one thing, a scrap of paper taped to the inside of the wardrobe, almost hidden, the writing faint, as if written with a fading pencil. It said, "If you found this, then I was real." On the way home, we didn't say much, but we knew something had shifted. We had crossed a line, not into closure, but into permission. Permission to live forward without her presence, with her story woven through every step. That night on the rooftop, the silence frame was filled in. Someone had drawn a door open, wind pouring through it, in streaks of chalk and color, and inside the doorway for Thermoses, 4 shadows, 1 feather. Beneath it, 1 sentence in her handwriting. "You made me into more than memory." We lit candles again, not because we were sad, but because we were still here. And that mattered. That meant something. We stayed. Until sunrise, Elias read one of her poems aloud. Elias finally left something behind. His old headphones, Ruha, drew a window across the floor and filled it with stars and me. Sat in silence and felt warm. For the first time since she left, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I felt like I was holding it, right where it belonged. The voice that waited in the walls, the package had no return. Address. Just a single feather sticker sealing the envelope. Elias almost didn't open it. Said it felt too final. Too deliberate. But when we finally peeled it open, the cassette inside made the whole room go still, labeled in her unmistakable handwriting. For after the silence, we didn't listen to it right away. We sat around it first, like it was a person, a version of her we weren't ready to hear. A ghost with something left to say. Ruha ran her finger along the edge. Elias stared out the window like he didn't want to be here when it played. I just held the tape in my hands, let it warm in my palm, like maybe she'd touched it. Before slipping away, Elias brought the old tape player, the same one Elias once used to leave. Lullabies on the Rooftop. We placed it in the middle of the circle and pressed play. At first just static, soft, almost like wind. Then her voice, not loud, not broken, just present, like she was sitting right beside us again. If you're listening, that means you stayed, and I'm glad, so glad I didn't leave because of you. I left because of the weight I hadn't learned how to share. The sound of her breath filled the pause, like she was gathering herself, like she was letting herself be fragile for the first time. You taught me what softness is. You reminded me that silence doesn't have to mean alone, and that some people will stay even when you offer them nothing but pieces. There was music in the background, faint, like someone playing piano in a dream. Sabirah hummed a note, then laughed under her breath, a quiet sound that knocked the wind out of all of us. I don't know where I'll end up. Maybe nowhere, maybe just in stories. But if you've made it this far, you don't need me anymore. You were always writing your own story. I was just a comma in your sentence. We cried, each in our own way. Elias sat back, palms over his face. Elias finally let his shoulders drop. Ruha curled into herself, forehead to knees, and me. I just closed my eyes and let her voice braid through every memory I thought I'd buried. Then, softly, I love you. Not because you made me stay, but because you let me go without making it a failure. The tape clicked. Ended. The silence after was the loudest thing in the room. We didn't rewind it, didn't play it again. Some things only get said once, and that makes them matter more. Later that night, we went to the rooftop, brought the player with us, set it on the bench, taped the cassette to the back wall, and beneath it wrote, "For the ones still learning how to leave without vanishing." We made a choice after that to open the rooftop for real, not just to us, but to anyone who needed it, anyone carrying silence and no place to set it down. We cleaned, painted, left chalk buckets and tea bags and paper cups, and a sign at the entrance. If you're looking for someone, start by being found. People came, not many, but just enough. Some wrote names on the wall, some drew feathers, some left nothing and just stared at the sky for hours. One boy brought a thermos and asked, "Do I have to earn the tea, or is it just here?" A tea. We said, "It's always just here." We built something together, a space between grief and wonder, a home for the in-between, for the unsaids, for the commas. One night, we found a new message on the silence frame. Different handwriting, still warm. It said, "I didn't know her, but I think she knew me." We all just smiled, because somehow that was the point. Sabirah was never trying to be remembered. She was trying to remind us how to see, how to pause, how to build rituals out of thermoses and chalk. And now, every time someone adds to the wall, we whisper one sentence before we leave: "You belong here." The rooftop that remembered us, we knew it was coming. The construction signs, the fencing, the quiet apology from the building's new owners. We're making room for something new. Bay didn't say it cruelly, but it still cracked something. You can't tell a rooftop it's temporary. Not when it holds ghosts and tea stains and promises. We had 1 week. That's what they gave us, 7 days to say goodbye to the space that had become a person, a mirror, a home. We didn't cry, not immediately, because grief doesn't always start loud. Sometimes it begins like a breath held too long and ends like a whisper that never finds its echo. We gathered everyone we could, some from the first days, some who only came once, some who never knew her, but knew what it felt like to hold silence and not have a place to put it. Elias brought the THER Moses. Our UHA printed dozens of Sabirah sketches and hung them on string-like prayer flags. Ilyas returned the headphones, placed them on the bench, this time with batteries. I brought nothing, just myself, because that was enough now. We were the artifacts. On the 6th day, a stranger came, mid-30s, tired eyes, carried a paper bag like it held something fragile. He didn't introduce himself, just walked to the silence frame, placed the bag gently at its base, then turned to leave. Elias stopped him. "Did you know her?" The man didn't turn, just said, "No, but she knew someone who saved me." We waited until he disappeared, then opened the bag. Inside, a thermos, warm, still. Steaming weed, passed it around without speaking, just held the warmth and understood. It was never about remembering Sabirah. All it was about continuing her. That night, we held a ritual. No speeches, no scripts, just one rule: say something that never found a voice. Ruha went first, said, "I used to think softness made me disposable." Leah said, "I never believed someone could see me and not want to fix me." Ilyas whispered, "The day she left me, I thought I became invisible. Now I think I just became quiet enough to be found." When it was my turn, I didn't speak. I walked to the silence frame, picked up the chalk and wrote, "You were never the end of the story. You were the pen." The final day came, faster than we expected. Construction trucks outside, sky overcast, no birds, just breath and heart and presence. We left the wall untouched, didn't try to preserve it, didn't beg them to spare it. We knew the rooftop wasn't in the concrete, it was in us. Before we walked away, we stood in a circle, held hands, and Ruha said one sentence: "When the silence finds them, may they have somewhere to go." 3 years later, I passed by the building again. It was new now, glass and steel and nothing familiar. But on the alley wall beside it, someone had drawn a feather, in chalk, white and soft, and almost erased by the rain. But still there, still trying, still waiting. I left a paper cup beside it, poured warm tea, and whispered, "Thank you for seeing us first."